Gallup poll a couple years ago found that 9 out of 10 workers said that they would work for less money if they had more purpose in the work that they did. So we crave purpose. And so this is another thing that a leader can do, is constantly talk about not just, oh, we're going to make so much money this quarter, but to talk about why. Why do we do this work? To share how we're changing the lives of our customers, how we're making the world a better place with the work that we do. That people can get behind. And so this purpose element, coupled with this idea of working better together, with psychological safety, are really superchargers for what we do at work.
I create clear thinking and decisive leaders who can amplify their influence. Contact me to find out how I can help you or your organisation.
And today our guest is Scott Shute. How are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing very well. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Scott, you've got such a lovely smile. Tell me what makes you happy.
What makes me happy? I try to make life make me happy. That's when you're in it, is when everything gives you joy from the inside out. But the big things, my wife, my kids, my hobbies, I play guitar, I do landscape photography, I ride my bike, and then I'm trying to change work from the inside out. Those are the things that give me joy.
I love that. And joy is such an important word, isn't it? Because you can be unhappy and still be joyful.
That's right. I definitely draw a distinction between joy and happiness. They are two different things.
So tell me more about you then.
Yeah. Well, I had a career as an executive in technology here in Silicon Valley. I'm in San Jose, California. And that culminated in a position at LinkedIn. I was the VP of Global Customer Operations. I led a big team of over 1,000 people. So that's part of my life. But there's this other part of my life, which is, I would say, I'm a seeker. I've had a spiritual practice since I was 13, a meditation or contemplation practice. I've been teaching since I was in college. It's a huge part of my life, but one that I never really talked about or embraced at work until I got to LinkedIn, because LinkedIn was such an open place. Our CEO was talking about mindfulness, talking about compassion out in the world. And I started as a volunteer, and then I was the executive sponsor of our mindfulness program, which we built from scratch with a bunch of volunteers, including me. And then I turned it into a full-time gig. I was the head of mindfulness and compassion programs at LinkedIn for 3 years. And then COVID happened. I wrote a book. Now I'm out in the world on my own doing all the things, being an entrepreneur, doing speaking and coaching and trying to make the world a better place.
That is so cool. I would never have guessed that LinkedIn would have had a department like the one you've set up. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a little surprising, isn't it? It's a little.
Why
surprising.
didn't LinkedIn ever say?
Why? Well, when you think about the world of work these days, work has changed in the last, well, especially 100 years. But if you look about the history of work over thousands and thousands of years, for the most part, it wasn't great for workers, right? We had the agrarian age, and it was kind of kings and slaves or indentured servants and landowners. Not great for the workers. And then we had the industrial age in the 1800s, and you imagine a big factory where we're all kind of making the same thing, and probably the workers were viewed as just part of the machinery as well. But in today's world, in the information age, what we realize, especially with information companies, is that by far a company's biggest asset or its biggest value is the employees themselves, are the employees themselves. And over the last 10 or 20 or 30 years, employees want more. They need more. They're requiring more. And when there's a war for talent, they will go to the companies who are providing more. And what is that more? Well, they want a place where they can do good work, where they can be at their best. They want a manager who's compassionate or empathetic towards them. They want to be treated fairly. And they want to be seen and heard and acknowledged. And part of that, all of that stuff that we did in the mindfulness world and the compassion world, is about making sure that our employees are well taken care of. It's a signal from the company that says, we care about you. And not just so that you can work harder and get more done. We care about you as a person, because we're all people too, and we want to create a place that we're proud of working at. That's the mindfulness piece. On the compassion piece, wow, that's everything. It's everything. Every part of how we run the business can have compassion at its roots. How we build product, how we sell product, how we service product, how we treat each other. And when we get it right, we're way more successful. We're way more successful than companies who are only focused on profits.
Yeah. Because it's quite intuitive to believe that, isn't it? And yet...
Yes. And yet we have thousands of years of history and inertia that make it hard for us to really grasp. So it's when you say it's easy to intuit, here's how I think about that. And I agree with you. So if you think about your primary relationship or your best friend or whoever, and if you said, my goal in this relationship is to be happy, that's a reasonable goal. That's why we're in relationships. And to go about being happy, I'm going to insist on getting my way 100% of the time. Well, I mean, we laugh, but clearly that's not the recipe for happiness. Just like in a company, if you
or
said,
not universal happiness, it might be the way for the one individual's way of getting happiness.
Yeah. Well, not for very long, I would gather. They're not going to be in that relationship very long, it would be my guess. But the company works the same way. If we said, okay, well, the company, and this is not what I believe, but if we said the company exists to make money, we only exist to make money. So we're going to insist on every decision is about making money first. So if it's a negotiation with the customer, I'd only want to make money. If it's something we're doing with employees, I'm only thinking about money. Of course, it doesn't work that way. Just like in our relationships, it works when we create a balance. So in an organization, it works when we create a balance of all of our stakeholders, not just shareholders. So our stakeholders are our employees, creating a great place for them to do great work. It's for our customers, creating amazing value, long-term value, so that they'll stay with us. And then when we do those things, it's actually even better for our shareholders who have given us their money and hopes for exchange for growth on that return. So when we do this balance, everybody wins.
Makes sense. So I know you've said that companies that operate using basic consciousness business practice are about 1,400% more profitable. So first of all, what is basic conscious business practices? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, at a high level. So I'm citing Raj Sisodia and the team that wrote the book Firms of Endearment and later Conscious Capitalism. So that's where the research comes from. And they found that companies who create this balance that I'm speaking of, this balance of solving for the whole instead of just solving for finance or, the we instead of the me. These companies that did that were 14 times or 1,400% more profitable than the S&P average.
That's just amazing.
So it's just amazing, right? And the challenge, even if I share this with executives, the challenge is, but quarterly earnings. It happens every quarter. I got to go tell the street. I got to, and so the challenge is creating that long-term view of things, the long-term view of profitability based on the long-term view of our relationship with our customers and the long-term view of our relationship with our employees. That's one of the biggest changes we can make.
So what's the biggest factor, do you think, in building a high-performing team?
Well, it's one of my favorite topics. So Google did some research 6 or 8 or maybe even 10 years ago called Project Aristotle. And they were looking for, what makes a high-performing team. And I'd be really curious. I've never talked to the people who did the research, but I'd be really curious what they thought they were going to find. But it turns out it's not our level of IQ. It's not the level of diversity or where we went to school or any of those things. The single biggest factor in creating a high-performing team is psychological safety. So if you think about that as an employee, and actually think about it as a human being, because we are Homo sapiens first, right? We are animals. We don't like to think of ourselves that way, but everything about us, our first instinct is always an animal instinct. And so if we live in a state of fear, or even if it's not quite fear, of anxiety or trepidation or whatever you want to call it, we're not going to do our best work at work. But when we feel relaxed, when we feel like there is trust in the room, we trust our manager, we trust our colleagues, then we can kind of, relax. And this is when we are at our best. It's when we are at our most creative. It's when we work the longest and the hardest because we are with other people that we want to work for and with. And the magic happens. So psychological safety is one of the biggest things that a manager can do, a leader can do on their team to build performance.
I'm trying to think now of the teams, the high-performing teams that I've been in. And I think take away, obviously, the performance part because, I've already said they were high-performing. I think the thing that I would say that made them different was I was super excited to come into work to be part of the team. Yeah. And these are like teams of, the exec team. So it's not as if we're all in the same department. We're all in our own departments coming together to achieve something good.
Sure.
I think when I think about the ones that had the highest performance were the one where we were all excited to be working with each other for each other.
Yes. There's a huge element of the team part, the psychological safety. There's another big element that is attractive to us as individuals, and that is having purpose in the work that we do. Gallup poll a couple of years ago found that 9 out of 10 workers said that they would work for less money if they had more purpose in the work that they did. So we crave purpose. And so this is another thing that a leader can do is constantly talk about not just, we're going to make so much money this quarter, but to talk about why. Why do we do this work? To share how we're changing the lives of our customers, how we're making the world a better place with the work that we do. That people can get behind. And so this purpose element, coupled with this idea of working better together, with psychological safety, are really superchargers for what we do at work.
Yeah, I love that because to say that you're in, to try to inspire a team to work harder because the company's going to make more money is not really relatable to people that are trying to pay their mortgage.
Exactly. And they're not going to see that much of it, right? I mean, look, it's fun to be on a winning team. It is. If we say we're going to be number one in our market, there's an element that people can get behind.
Yeah, yeah.
But it doesn't last very long. People want more. They want something meatier than that.
Yeah. I remember years ago when I worked in an organisation before I was a manager, and as staff, we used to, it sounds really funny, we used to work out the net pay for increases based on how many bras could you buy or how many packs of underwear. Because you'll get like a figure and it sounds really great. You're like, and then you work it back and you're like, oh, that's like 10 pairs of underwear or something stupid. And it kind of like go, oh, that wasn't really all that really.
That's right. And even if it was impressive, we as humans, we get used to the next thing so easily. So it doesn't matter how much you make. If you throw on another 10% or 20% or 2% or whatever the number, we're excited for a little bit, but then a month later, it's just part of the fabric. It's no longer the thing.
Okay,
so what is lasting is the purpose. It's the relationships with work.
Yes. So I've got a question for you, and I think you'll be the right man to answer it because it's just something I've been pondering. So let's think of the world before COVID, and you still had the same amount, unfortunately, of disengaged individuals, but they all said, I come to work for the people because the people are great. And then you've got people working away from the people, doing the same jobs that they were disengaged with, but the people that kept them there are no longer there, or they see them once every 2 weeks or something like that.
Yeah.
So based on the stuff that you know and you do, how can organizations ensure people still feel a sense of purpose, still feel a sense of camaraderie, even when they are not physically together? Because even though I think that some organisations have gone fully back to work, but it's not the same. It's not the same as it was pre-COVID. It doesn't feel the same.
That's true. That's true. Well, I think let's take it two ways. First, there's policy, and a lot of companies are having people come back to work for exactly this reason. Because what we're seeing is a huge increase in loneliness and a huge increase in life dissatisfaction. And so part of that is, we're not with people anymore. Of course, all of us want that freedom to be able to start a load of laundry, or to be able to go to the doctor's office, or to do whatever we need to do, or to not do the commute that's 45 minutes or an hour each way. Of course, we all want freedom from that. But the downside is this lack of connection. And so first is policy. We can decide as a company how we're going to work it. And maybe there's a magic middle where we're in the office 3 days a week or something. But if the policy is everybody's at home, everybody's remote, because there are a lot of companies like that, then it's critical. It's critical as a business strategy, not a nice to have, a business strategy to build connection activities into the work. So instead of just jumping on a call and diving into our action list and getting stuff done, because we're all busy, we want to get stuff done.
Let's take a quick break. As a leader, you know that having a strong level of influence is essential to achieving your goals. But how do you know if you're truly making an impact? Take the How Influential Are You scorecard to get a clear picture of your current level of influence and identify areas for improvement. With personalised recommendations and valuable strategies, you'll be able to amplify your influence and make a real difference as a leader. Don't miss this opportunity to improve your leadership skills. Take the scorecard now at amplifyyourinfluence.scoreapp.com. Welcome back to the Maverick Paradox. This is the podcast for the pathologically curious.
We have to build in the things that we would have had at work. At work, we're waiting with each other for the conference room to open. And so we have 2 or 3 minutes of chit chat before the meeting starts. Or we're in the conference room waiting for our friends, our colleagues to come from another place. There's this chit chat. That chit chat, that office cooler, those lunches, the meeting each other in the break room, that is actually pretty critical. Now, some people need it more than others, so there's some self-awareness that's required for each one of us to know how much is needed for us, and what our role is in that. But the role of a leader, the role of an organization is to make sure that those needs are being addressed, and lots of ways to do that.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's probably worth thinking in terms of organisational design. I know at the beginning of COVID, I was speaking to an organisation on the podcast who was set up to be remote from their very beginning, so way pre-COVID. And exactly what you said, they had already built in the informality of work into their work, and they were hiring people across countries who they had never met, but everything was working fine because they had built in from the beginning informality.
Right.
And maybe that's the problem. Maybe we're not informal enough in the workplace.
I think it depends on the culture, but that's absolutely possible. So I think whatever helps to make people feel connected. If there's too much of a formality and you don't break through the exterior to develop a real connection, then it's just going to feel lonely, right? People want to see each other as people, even the top leaders. I mean, look, we don't want them to bring their total mess to work. We want them to be a leader, but we do want to see some of their humanity. And especially with our colleagues, we want to be able to send cat videos or memes to each other. And just, we're friends too. Yes, we're getting stuff done. But there's this level of collegiality or friendship that happens too in our work relationships.
That leads me on nicely, I think, to talking about compassion in the workplace. So over here in the UK, the NHS has a thing about compassionate leaders. And I think, how does an organisation scale compassion where it really is compassion and not some pseudo compassion because it's like in the job spec or something?
Yeah. Well, I do think it needs to be in the job spec first.
Yeah.
But yeah, I hear your point. I think it happens at an operational level and also at a human level. So let me take it maybe what we might not think of as compassion. So my definition for compassion, there's lots of good ones. I like this one, is our capacity, because capacity ebbs and flows all the time, for three things. First is awareness of others. The second is a mindset of kindness towards them, or a mindset of wishing the best for them. And then the courage to take action, right? So usually we think of compassion like, oh, my friend had their grandmother is ill, and so I'm thinking of them now. And we tend to have these really specific views on compassion. I want to broaden that to think about, what does it mean to be compassionate towards our customers? So I'll give you an example. At LinkedIn, for a long time, I sat on the product executive team. And so every week there were 4 or 5 or 8 product reviews. And it's a little like, well, in the US, it's Shark Tank, but I think it's called Dragon's Den in the UK, depending on what your listeners are. It's a little bit like that without all the attitude or testosterone. So you might imagine a product manager's bringing their idea or their next round of their product to a series of executives to get their approval or their feedback. And the first question, it will go something like, because of these changes, we're going to get 16% more engagement, or in the world of LinkedIn, 16% more clicks. The first question, if they don't answer it themselves, was always, well, how's the member experience? Meaning, what's the customer experience for this thing? And if the answer was, well, hey, did I mention there were 16% more clicks? If the experience wasn't good, but it just generated more revenue, the meeting actually stops. There's no point in continuing. And it will then become a discussion about our number one value, which is members first. And I guarantee you that after that discussion, that product manager will never do that again. They will always be leading with this members first mentality. So that's a simple way that a leader can continue to emphasize, here's what we do here. Right? By this policy, and it's not really a policy, it's a value, it's a core belief system. In the same way that if you want, sometimes we talk about in Silicon Valley or some of these companies, there's you could say a no jerk rule. Sometimes there's a stronger word for that. But the idea is that regardless of how talented someone is, we won't hire them or keep them if they're a problem, right? If they're a real jerk, like, we know that's a cancer to the organization, even if they're a super high performer. And so if that's the ethos, then it becomes incumbent on that person's manager to make sure that they follow it. Because if you're the one manager who keeps that person, then nobody really believes what you say. And so we take these values, but the values have to be lived, right? It has to go in your performance evaluation. If we expect leaders to be compassionate or empathetic or good people leaders, then we put that in their performance evaluation. We make their pay and their bonus be contingent on them being a good leader. So we have the ideals, the design at the high level. We enforce it with the operations at the daily level.
Yeah, I was thinking when you was talking that another word for compassion in the way that you talk there is love, isn't it?
Exactly.
How would you extend love in this situation? And that's the same whether you're doing mass restructuring or whether you're doing mass hiring or whatever, because you can always extend love in every single circumstance.
That's exactly it. It's that simple. What would love do is the question we would ask for every single action, every single policy. And it doesn't mean, oh, we're going to give all our products away. No, it's remember, it's balance, right? The company still needs to make money to stay in business. So if we think of as a three-legged stool, it's shareholders and employees and customers, and it's creating a balance for them. So yes, we have to have an amazing business model. We treat our customers well. We treat our employees well. What would love do for all three groups in creating that balance?
Yeah. And I know that a lot of people don't like the word love in that kind of context because the word love is maybe primarily a sexual thing. So therefore it feels weird when you say like humanity kind of love everything. But I suppose if you know, in a corporate, if that felt too weird, it's the equivalent really is just to make humane decisions. And when you make decisions, think of the humanity of it. You know, there's lots of ways to dismiss somebody. You can send them a text or a voicemail, or you could speak to them. You know, it's like there's lots of different ways of doing anything. And like you said on LinkedIn with a new product, you know, there are lots of ways to enforce the change with your customers. But if you're thinking of, you know, humanity, you're thinking about how are they are going to receive it and how is it going to affect them.
That's right.
Now, I'm just sitting there curious now to see where I'm going to get people putting in comments and saying, yeah, but LinkedIn did this. So it'd be quite interesting to say.
Oh, look, first of all, nobody's perfect. No company is perfect, right? We tend to try to, like, if somebody has something wise to say, someone else will tear them down by saying, oh, but this also happened. Of course. There's not a perfect person in the world. There never has been. None of the spiritual leaders were perfect. None of them. Everybody makes mistakes. We're all learning. But it starts with intention. And there's definitely a range of consciousness.
Mm-hmm. All right, then that makes a lot of sense. So for an organisation then that's sitting there, you've got CEO listening in and you say, maybe I'll give this thing a whirl, or maybe it's a HR director saying, how do I convince the CEO? Is there a return on investment in investing in mindfulness programs, or is it just an excuse to be a bit wishy-washy and to pretend that you care about staff?
So mindfulness specifically, which is different than the things we've been talking about operationalizing compassion. But let's talk about mindfulness specifically. If somebody asks me about ROI, look, there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of research papers that show that having a mindfulness practice reduces stress, reduces anxiety, creates better leaders, creates better relationships, creates better sleep, adds to more creativity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So if someone asks me, I usually engage in a conversation, something like, well, how many people do you have at work? You know, are you big enough to have a gym? You know, do you have a gym at work? Right? Well, did you ask the gym director the ROI of the rowing machine that they just bought a few weeks ago to add to the gym? Or in the, if you adjust the thermostat from, well, I'll speak in Fahrenheit. If you go from 74 degrees down to 70 degrees, did somebody do the ROI on what that was like to make it more comfortable for the employees? Probably not, because you just knew inside that's if employees are comfortable, if they are physically fit, they're going to do better work. Well, of those employees, however many you have at work, how many of them, what percentage of them do you need to run a 6-minute mile? How many of them do you need to, for their job, bench press twice their weight? Because that's what they're doing in the gym. But for those same employees, what percentage of them do you want to be mentally stable? What percentage of them do you want to be mentally focused, emotionally stable? Right? And then it becomes pretty obvious, right? It becomes pretty obvious. These things don't cost a lot. So it just depends. Do you care for your employees or not? And do you care for their mental well-being? And if the answer is yes, then adding whatever it is, a few tens of thousands of dollars to do a company-wide program is nothing. It's nothing in the big scheme of things.
Yeah. Sadly, though, I suspect some people would answer that as, no, actually, I don't really care.
Well, then I would say good luck to you, because there's a lot of companies that are going to be much more successful than you over time.
Yeah. Okay, before we end then, just a final question, I think. How can someone or how can a leader ensure that there is high performance, let's say but they retain the humanity? Because sometimes people drive high performance in a team or an organization at the cost of the people. So how do we maintain our humanity while we're still trying to strive for whatever high performance means for us?
They live together. They live together. You can demand a lot from a team. Demand is maybe the wrong word, though. You can inspire a lot in a team. You can set high expectations. You can set really high expectations and also be human and humane. Like, hey, as a team, here are the expectations for this team. We expect blah, 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 blah types of results. And also, I see you. I'm going to not only, okay, here's the thing. Most leaders are pothole managers, meaning there can be 1,000 miles of perfect road in their life or their work, but if there's one pothole, this is where they will focus exclusively their time. A great leader focuses equally across the 1,000 miles of road, right? And so they are not only pointing out the pothole and requesting or even demanding that it be fixed, but they're also rewarding the people who kept the perfect road. They're also celebrating the people who have done a great job and didn't make any mistakes. They're also celebrating the people who understood how that pothole got there in the first place and understood how it got fixed. We can have it all, but it requires us as leaders to not just go negative. The best leaders are not just leading with fear, they're leading with inspiration. They're pulling people along, not pushing them.
Yeah, I agree. I think maverick leaders are ones that do not rely on legitimate power, coercive power, that kind of thing. It's about recognizing that they influence people. They don't manipulate them, they influence them. And to influence people, you're looking to have alignment. You're looking to get rid of your own ego and, to get the right solution, not to be right and to be more objective. Yeah, it's definitely pull strategy rather than a push strategy.
Yeah.
All right. So, Scott, do you have any final comments?
Well, sure. So one of the things that we're doing is building a community of people who are interested in this work. It's called changingwork.org. So if you're a coach, a consultant, if you're a leader, even an individual contributor, we're trying to build a community where we can all work together to make the future a better place for that. And so if you're interested in joining us, you can use the coupon code podcast24 for some extra time in our community. So I hope to see you there, changingwork.org.
Brilliant. Scott, thank you so much for coming on the show.
My pleasure.
And thank you out there for tuning in to the Maverick Paradox podcast. I am Judith, your host, and I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation.
The Maverick Paradox Magazine. The Maverick Paradox Magazine is for the pathologically curious. Written by a swagger of socialized mavericks who are divergent thinkers, the magazine tackles the biggest issues affecting maverick leaders today. You might be a business owner or a leader within an organization who wants to have your thinking challenged, to be exposed to a diversity of thought, or to learn from diverse experts in their fields. If so, the Maverick Paradox Magazine is for you. Join the swagger at themaverickparadox.com and engage in the conversation.